My laptop's went as well.
So maybe like this is like a pop up.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Rebellious Truth 2026, our annual lecture recital presented by Celtic and Scottish Studies, the School of Scottish Studies Archives at the University of Edinburgh, and Edinburgh Tradfest. My name is Laurie Watson, and I'm your host this afternoon. I'm a lecturer in Celtic and Scottish Studies and still sometimes a folk musician. Welcome also to those joining us on the live stream and, of course, anyone in the future listening via the archive recording. The idea behind Rebellious Truth and our series of talks and performances is to present the folk artist's knowledge and experience connecting traditional arts with a focus on music to wider societal concerns. Previous topics have included climate change, gender inequality, a retrospective on 70 years of folk music, Gaelic language learning, and mental health. And today we'll hear from Dick Gaughan, beloved folk singer and instrumentalist. Dick chose the title MUCKLE Sangs for this talk, and that will encompass aspects of his life, his musical, cultural and political influences, music and touring, and of course his commitment to the traditional songs and tunes of Scotland and Ireland and the Scots language, including the big ballads or MUCKLE Sangs from his title. But first, we have an opening performance from University of Edinburgh traditional artist in residence Fraser Fifield, who I know will be familiar to many of you. A composer, improviser and performer on Scottish small pipes, Highland pipes, whistles and soprano saxophone, Fraser is a well-established artist, having launched his performance career in the 90s. Fraser will be presenting his instrumental version of the Inchcombe Antiphonor, the oldest musical manuscript we have in Scotland, dating from 1340 in the coming month in June. So look out for an announcement of that performance and the release of his fantastic recording. He has developed a saxophone quintet of this old, wonderful piece of music quartet. Someone obviously got the sack. Maybe it was me. So saxophone quartet, and we are in the department absolutely dying to hear it. Fraser, as many of you will know, has enjoyed a varied musical career to date, performing with a range of well-known artists, bands and solo projects, and releasing 11 albums of original music, including a recent triptych of collaborative records across jazz and folk music styles. So please welcome Fraser Fifield.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be here. Thank you very much. Delighted to be playing in front of a true musical legend. I think it's fair to say. Term overused perhaps, but fair in this case. And I thought I would, it's Sunday afternoon after all, so I'm not going to belt into it at 100 miles an hour. I've got song tunes on my mind, and was reminded of a few there listening to the music before coming on stage. There's plenty to choose from, but one that's been in mind for a few days is from the northeast of Scotland. It's a favourite, and it's got a nice melody. That's the thing about these songs; they've all got nice tunes. So I'm going to play the tune. Please sing along if you know the words. I like the verse where it talks about when the Queen's wanting men to fecht with her foes. It's not to the roast beef devourer she goes, but awa to the north and among the brave and the daring, the lads that were brought up on tatties and herring. Thank you. And oh, sorry, Craig. I played down the. We went to all the trouble of sound checking these different microphones, and I played down the one I'm supposed to speak down. Never mind. I hope it sounded okay. So I'll carry on with a tune of a song. Again, it's a beautiful one. It's a Gaelic song called Carcel a Chuain, I think. The Ocean's Cycle is the translation. And then I'll play a few jigs. Thank you. That's me speaking down the whistle mic. It's all good. Two jigs from Donegal, taught to me by my better half, Talia, so that's me in the good books. back to the song themes, I think. And these are two great tunes associated with our main guest today. The first is, I don't think they really bear introduction. I'll just play them. Try to play them anyway. Thanks very much indeed. I'll finish up with a few tunes on the small pipes again. The first tune is indeed the tune of a song from the northeast. It's known as Gin I Were Where the Gaddy Runs, or the Back of Benihee, which is where the Gaddy runs. And from there, I can't back introduce these ones because I'm going to leave the stage, so I'll tell you for definite just now. From there, I'll play a strathspey called Delve Inside, and then a bunch of wee reels, two of which I learned from Cara Matheson stroke Cabra Cayley, and then a wee one called Paddy Taylor's, and the very last one, you'll all know it very well. I won't tell you the title, leave you guessing. Thanks very much for listening.
Fraser Fifield, fantastic. Just stunning. It's been such a joy to work with Fraser over the last 3 years and to have him as part of the university community. And I think his role will come to an end in June of this year, and we're excited to see where he goes next. So there's no interval today. We're just going to do a little informal reshuffle on here, and then we'll get started. There will be a Q&A later on, so please do feel free to come and go as you need to from the auditorium. Okay, I'm going to bring on Dick Gaughan now to get settled, and then I'll do an introduction, okay? There we are. So, thank you to Craig for a quick reshuffle of the bits and pieces. I know, Dick, you're not going to enjoy this. I'm going to do a big introduction, and then it's on our archive recording, so bear with me. Hello, everybody. We are honoured, of course, to welcome Dick Gaughan to give this year's Rebellious Truth lecture. A towering figure in Scottish folk music, respected not just here in his home country, and of course close to Leith, which is his hometown really, but across the globe. A singer of rare quality, a peerless guitar stylist, a charismatic performer and champion of social justice. Never known for behaving himself. Dick sets new standards for emotional range and depth of interpretation that many of us continue to aspire to. It seems that every recording is a masterclass in folk performance and integrity of character. Born in Glasgow but made in Leith, Dick developed his playing and singing in folk clubs and pubs from the late 60s onwards, among a group of luminaries, several of whom are in the room today, and of course making a go of full-time music within a few years of his start. Influenced by his mother, who was from the Highlands and sang in Gaelic and English, and his Irish father, who played fiddle and some guitar, as well as, of course, some popular music of the time, the influx of great folk and skiffle music from North America, and particularly Doc Watson in those early days. Dick has described his career as largely without strategy, but it's pretty clear that his strong principles and sense of self often dictated the direction of travel, and a shining example of that approach, I think. Recording albums for himself and others, his 1981 LP, Handful of Earth, is widely regarded as a classic, and quoted by many artists as a seminal influence on their own work. Other albums include No More Forever in 1972, A Shift with a Different Kind of Love Song in 1983, and then several fantastic albums with green tracks, including Sail On in 96, Redwood Cathedral in 98, Outlaws and Dreamers in 2001, and the Apprentice Piece compilation in 2002. In more recent years, we've had the absolute joy of hearing or having access to some of the many, many live performances from Dick's career, which are perhaps really where we get a more complete sense of his knowledge and expertise in folk music performance and his own music too, of course. The studio albums are only part of the picture, and while the thousands and thousands of live performances for small and large audiences all around the world are ephemeral and hard to imagine, you can't have been at all of them, but they're affecting, connecting and informing and part of a global formation of folk network or community, a human understanding. And there's a physicality to live performance that you never really get over, and nor would you want to. Dick's own songs were recorded by, among others, Billy Bragg, Mary Black and Capercaillie. He was an early member of Boys of the Loch and Five Hand Reel, and in the 90s founded Clan Alba, a supergroup featuring Brian McNeill, Mary McMaster and Patsy Seddon, Fred Morrison, Davy Steele, Mike Travis and Dave Tulloch. Widely understood as a man of the people and an artist whose work reflected and addressed the social and political issues of the age, Dick's career was cut short by a stroke in 2016. The subsequent campaign by fans and industry professionals led to a Kickstarter campaign raising funds to support the release of a 7 CD and DVD boxed set, Revolution 1969 to 83, which was released in 2025, and more releases are planned. The ongoing legal campaign to regain access to Dick Gaughan's recordings is setting an important precedent for folk artists, and the crowdfunding continues for that. So do get involved if you want to support it, and of course, thanks to Colin Harper and everyone involved for their work on the project. So today, Dick and I agreed that the talk can be a freewheeling affair, and I know that our audience this afternoon will be keen to engage. And so there will be a Q&A. We will open it up to you all, and I'll let you know when. So, if it's okay, without further ado, please welcome Dick Gaughan.
Hello, I should start by saying I can't really see any of you because I should make my apologies first. I'm almost blind, so I can't see very much at all. And to give thanks to my daughter Laura for helping me on and off and being my eyes for the day. So if I, as I say, I can't see any of you, so even if you were closer, I wouldn't see you. I should say that I've never seen myself as having a career at all because I just played music. That was it. And if it was useful, then great. Very, very fortunate to have made a living out of it. I've made something resembling a living. Nobody makes a lot of money out of this type of music, which I learned to my cost after having been with Five Hand Reel. Before that, I was like everybody else. I was determined that I would make a living, make loads of money, be a big star and all the rest of it. And halfway through playing with Five Hand Reel, I realised that was never going to be the case. And I've often said to people since, in this game you can either make money or you can make music. And if you're lucky, you can do both. You can make music and make money if you're very, very lucky. But it's very difficult to do. So I have great gratitude for the fact that I actually managed to make a living and for what it's worth, make some music as well. But the music always took priority over making a living, to tell you the honest truth. I was always grateful when people wanted to come and hear it. And if I made money doing that, then fine. But that wasn't why I was there. And I suppose the correct way to do this was, I remember reading Ewan McCall's autobiography, and I thought the important thing about it was that he started out by, the book seemed to be divided into two parts. There was where I come from, who I am, and what I did as a result of that. And I thought that's very much the tradesman's kind of viewpoint of it. You know, this is who I am, and this is where I'm from, and this is why I do what I do. So I thought, just basically sketch out the background. Start with my grandparents. Good place to start. My mother's mother was a traveller from Northern Ireland, and as far as I remember, her name was Margaret Gibbons, and she moved over to Scotland just before the First World War and married a fellow called Joseph MacDonald, and he died as a result of the First World War inhaled gas in the trenches. He died shortly after the end of the war. And my granny got married again, and she married a fellow called John Loudon, and who didn't want any of the children there. There were two sisters that I know of. There was my mother and my aunt Nancy. So there were them. That was the MacDonald children, and the fellow Loudon decided he didn't want anything to do with them. It was quite common, and so they were farmed out. And I think they were farmed out. It could have been just straightforward, fostered out to people. But as far as I've been able to work out, they were farmed out to a fellow called John MacDonald, who was quite possibly a brother to Joseph MacDonald, my grandfather. But anyway, that was up in a place called Roybridge, just north of Spainbridge in Lochaber. And my mother grew up there. And it was a Gaelic spoken household, so she grew up speaking Gaelic and English, where they always prided themselves in that area of speaking absolutely perfect English, and probably Skye Gaelic as well, if I remember rightly. And my mother had nothing but contempt for Lowland Scots. She didn't like the language at all. She regarded it as being coarse English, which of course it was, very coarse English, but perfectly good Scots. But it was that kind of snobbery that existed among language at that time, and Scots was always kind of frowned. When I went to school, it was frowned on heavily, and you couldn't actually get away with speaking Scots. And I grew up kind of one half English spoken and the other quarter each between Lowland Scots and Gaelic. So I don't know very much Gaelic at all, but I'm speaking English at the moment, which I could rephrase the percentages again of what I could speak and what I couldn't speak. But I'm much happier speaking Scots, but I'm speaking English at the moment, or as close to English as I can get. Leith accent. But I grew up in the street speaking Scots all the time, speaking English in school, and speaking English to my mother, who either, if you didn't speak to her in English or in Gaelic, then she wouldn't answer you. And that was that part of the family anyway. My father was a guitar player and fiddle player first. And his father, also known as Dick Gaughan, so I've heard a long line of Dick Gaughans. There's a kind of family name, everybody. It was always the oldest son of any generation. He was always a son, and it was always called Dick, so or Richard. And my grandfather was originally known as Richie Gaughan, or known as Richie Dick, because his father was Dick, and he used that in the middle. It was very confusing. They were from a place called Bunnafolly in Dohoma in County Mayo, and he was a fiddle player, and his father was a fiddle player, and his father was a fiddle player, as far back as we can go until I get to my great-great-grandfather, who was a flute player. It was an aberration. So I'm from a long line of fiddle players. I never ever tried to play the fiddle because I couldn't understand what you did with a bow. You know, I was used to having a plectrum. And to this day, I can't even still work out an awful lot of what people do with their fingers when they're playing guitar, because I've no concept of what to do. You know, I used to listen to people like Andres Segovia when I was a kid and listen to it and think, I don't know how the hell he's doing that. But I wanted to do it with a plectrum. And I suppose the big turning point for me with that was that when I heard Doug Watson, who Laurie mentioned earlier, and I remember when I was a kid, my father had records of lots of skiffle people playing, or American folk musicians playing skiffle, and one of them was Doug Watson. And I remember being blown away with this and just thinking, I've got to learn this stuff. So I sat down and very methodically and kind of clinically learned everything I could from this Doc Watson record of Doc playing flat-pick guitar playing, which I was just amazed by the fact that you could do that with a plectrum. And decided then at that age even that all the music I heard, which was mostly traditional Irish music, I decided if you can do that with American music, you can do it with Irish music as well. So I kind of devoted a lot of my time to learning to do that. But I'm jumping the gun here. On my father's side, it was mostly Irish music, but my grandfather was from Douma in County Mayo, and my grandmother was from a family from MUCKLE Island, which is in Killala Bay, and her name was Bridget Madden, and she was my grandmother, and she was another one. She would only speak English. She wouldn't speak Gaelic or even Scots, because she'd been brought up, and there was always this very strange feeling of having to alienate herself from her background. And she changed her name. Her name was Bridget Madden, and she changed it to Elizabeth. So she was known as Lizzie Madden. And the reason for that was if you get some drunken idiot coming in and saying Biddy for Bridget, you'd be mistaken for Betty. And she seemed like quite happy with that, but she played down the Irish side. It was a time when there was a great deal of anti-Irish prejudice. And there were singers as well as being musicians. The one thing I remember is my grandmother, my Irish grandmother, played melodeon, which I never ever heard her play until I was old enough and bought an Anglo-German concertina, one of the push-pull type of squeeze boxes, and I brought it back home, and she said, "Oh, give me that, I know what that's about." And she sat down and played tunes on it immediately, which I'd never heard her play, never heard her play the melodeon because she didn't. And there was this thing, so there was all that going on. My grandfather was a fiddle player, and that's where the politics came from as well, because my grandfather, there's so much of that period in history, and particularly within my own family, that is just unknown. A lot of it's apocryphal. And the story in the family went that my grandfather drove lorries. Where he learned to drive lorries was coming over to Scotland and driving back with smuggled arms back into the War of Independence. So they were solid Republicans, my family. From everything I know about them, they very rarely discussed politics, except when they were pissed, and used to sing Fenian songs, as they classed them. So at that age, I learned very quickly the habit of changing song in the middle of a song. So you start singing one song, and if somebody came into the house that you didn't know or was a complete stranger, then you go into the mountains of Mourne or something. So it made for some strange bedfellows. But I learned the habit of doing that when I was a child. And carried on doing that. And when I was old enough, I began to realise what was happening musically. And one of the probably the first formative experience in terms of what I did later on was hearing my mother, because the regular family parties at our house, it was a kind of a Gaelic house almost, but my grandparents would encourage people to get pished and sing. They went in, usually at weekends, but especially at Christmas and New Year. New Year was a big thing in our house, and they would inevitably somebody would ask my mother to sing, and she would sing a song, usually in Gaelic, and my father would come in with all these dance band chords on the guitar, and I remember one incident very clearly where she turned around and yelled at him to shut up, and he said, "Why you shy? She said to him, "You're putting me off. I can't sing the song." And he said, "But you're singing in the wrong time." And she said, "The song has its own time, and it's not the one you're playing." So I think that stuck in my head, and when I grew up, it informed largely what I was doing. This whole idea that the guitar accompaniment and the voice were two entirely different things, which could merge together, but they weren't necessarily one had to follow the other. You know, that you had to start somewhere. You could do both. You could play guitar, and it was not in what people would regard as correct timing, which is a word I hate, correct, in relation to music. I hate terms like good, bad, right, wrong, and all that. I prefer to use the term common usage or common practice. And the term I came across when I read a wee book by Imogen Holst called The ABC of Music. And I thought, that's brilliant. It sums it up, because I always hated those expressions. You know, people would say, that's good music or that's bad music. And I would think, it's neither. It's just music. You know, either you like it or you don't like it. But you can't break it down. And what you're going to use as your criteria for assessing the music, you know. And normally the people would apply one set of aesthetics towards another one. So you get people judging traditional music by the standards of what they understand to be classical music. And they would try and interpose that and impose one upon the other. So I've always hated that, you know, that whole idea of there is such a thing as correct or incorrect. I much prefer the terms that Imogen Holst used, which was common practice. This is the way it's always been done in the past, or it's usually been done this way in the past. It doesn't mean to say it's right or it's wrong. It's just the way it was done. I find that a much more useful term for understanding what's going on in any kind of music. You know, there is no right or wrong. It either is or it's not. It has to be seen on its own merits. But I'm jumping the gun here a little bit. But with all that stuff from my mother and father, which I suppose was a formative experience, then in 1960s, having bounced around a wee bit, I played with a Beatles lookalike band for a while in North Wales, where I was through a series of bizarre fucking, excuse my language, there was a series of bizarre incidents happened that I ended up being sent off to be a Catholic priest at the age of, oh yes, I shelved that very quickly, but I went off they sent me off to be a Catholic priest, and the first thing I remember is in there, we had a band, which was, because the Beatles were maybe a year or two old at this point, 63, and I liked the Beatles from the first time I heard them. We used to listen a lot to things like Radio Luxembourg and stuff like that, and I heard this sound coming out, and it was a harmonica, but I didn't realise at the time. And there was a track called Love Me Do, which I thought was absolutely wonderful. It was nothing like anything I'd ever heard in terms of pop music. Because before that, I'd always been into like Buddy Holly, and I grew up listening to Buddy Holly and thought, great, I want to do that. And then Buddy Holly died in the plane crash, and I laid down the guitar. I wouldn't touch it again for just over a year. As a result, I was in mourning, because I thought that's the death of rock and roll came about with the death of Buddy Holly. And then along came the Beatles, I think 61, 62. when Love Me Do came out, and I thought it was wonderful. So I became very disappointed by Please Please Me, which followed on. I thought, they've just gone mainstream pop group here. This is garbage. So I hated it from then on. But it took me a year or so to get into this band that we had at the seminary. And it was frowned on by the priests that ran the place, but they couldn't do much about it. And so I did things like that. And then in the late 60s, I discovered folk clubs. Well, what I discovered was pubs that put on folk music, which was a kind of a crossover from skiffle, because my father had a skiffle band in the 50s, and he laid down the fiddle, took up the guitar, and had a skiffle band at that stage. And it was all stuff like Woody Guthrie and Leadbelly, things like that. And I'd never heard of these people. And that's where I learned it all from at that age, was listening to Woody Guthrie and Leadbelly in particular, because the Rock Island Line and stuff like that, you know. I remember the Rock Island Line was Leadbelly, and the Grand Coulee Dam, which was another big hit that they had, that was Woody Guthrie. So between the two, my father was right into all that, and I learned what I could of it. On top of the stuff I learned from Doc Watson as well, listening to the record. And graduated from there, you can call it graduated, into playing in public. And that came about because I was working in a paper mill, serving my time as a paper maker. And a couple of lads there were into what we called folk music in those days. And I got very friendly with a couple of them, but there was a lassie there that I quite fancied. And I made a date with her for one Friday night, and she didn't turn up. So I was broken-hearted, and my ego was crushed sufficiently that I thought, well, I'll go and drown my sorrows. So I'd never really drunk before that, and I went berserk after that. But I remember discovering the one place I'd heard of because the lads at work had talked to me about it. It was a pub called the Waverley Bar, which I discovered upstairs in the Waverley. So that was my drowning my sorrows there. And I went there, and there was a singer called Ronnie Johnson. And he was joined by a couple of others they called themselves the Edinburgh Singers. And I remember them very clearly, there was Ronnie Johnson, Bill Hill, and Tom Smith. And I thought, this is wonderful, I've never heard anything like this in my life. And they were singing all kinds of songs that I had no idea what they were. But I knew you loved it. And I then ended up talking to a fella who was at the bar that night, and he had an encyclopedic knowledge of what was going on in Edinburgh at that time, and he pointed me to two other pubs. There was the White Horse and the Holyrood Bar, and there was a wee place that you mentioned called the Log Cabin, which I don't know if there's anybody here old enough to remember the Log Cabin. And there's a few of you here who are similar age to myself, or even older. Well, there's not many older these days. But I discovered this place called the Log Cabin, and he said it's open all night, every night, and they have singers on. So that was my next port of call. But I think that was the first place I sang, was in this Log Cabin. And it was an old scout hut, which was out at Shandon in Edinburgh. And it was right on the side of the railway track. So I mentioned Gaughan McCall earlier on. In part of his autobiography, he mentions the fact that he and Peggy Seeger played. I remember it clearly because it was my 18th birthday. And It was Ewan and Peggy, and Ewan mentions the fact that they had to stop singing halfway through every song to let the trains go by, because otherwise they couldn't hear it. So I remember that clearly from reading that bit in Ewan's autobiography. I was there that night that he's talking about, and it was a very funny wee place. But I heard all kinds of people there floating through. There was Robin Williamson and who was the guy that sang with Robin at that time? Mike Hearn. Mike Hearn used to sing there as well occasionally. And I thought this is great, because here was the stuff, there was no limits, there was no rules attached, there was no this is good, this is bad, or anything. They just played what they played. And I thought it was brilliant, because there was absolute freedom of expression. You know, you could play what you want there. So I jumped on board and got a residency in the log cabin, and sang whatever I feel pleased to sing. You know, anything at all, whatever came into my head, and what I managed to learn in the period before I was there again. But I would sing whatever came into my head, and I think the most bizarre thing I ever did was a song that, if I learned half the songs off every album I ever got of Pete Seeger, and I thought, he did all kinds of stuff, and he used to do a Hindi devotional song that he sang, and I thought, this is great. So I retuned the guitar into what I thought was an approximation of what Pete was doing, and played this. But around about the same time, again, formative experiences. There was a fellow there called Colin Mackay, for those of you who remember him. And Colin saw himself as a kind of folk entrepreneur, and he ran several things. He ran a club called I can't remember what it was called, but it was in the Cowgate, just at the foot of John Knox's house. It was called the Toll Booth Tavern, and Colin ran this club, and he also now and again put other things on, and one of them was a concert that he did, and this was 1965, was a concert with Ravi Shankar, and I think we were possibly the only white faces in the audience to the Shankar concert, but I loved it, what Shankar was doing, but much more interesting to me at that point was what Alaraka, who was a tabla player, was doing, and I thought, this is good. I'm trying not to swear here. I thought...
It's okay, go for it.
No, I'm thinking about the editors later on if they're cutting this out. But I was astonished and knocked out by what Alaraka was doing, because he completely ignored the whole concept of bar lines and bar tempo. You know, there was no time signature to what he was doing at all. But it was a cycle of rhythm, rather than 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. It was 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3, and in all kinds of cross rhythms. And I thought, again, tying back to the concepts from my father and mother, doing different interpretations of what rhythm the song was in. Then I thought that's a direct link from there to what I'm listening to here when I heard Alaraka playing all this. Time was flexible, and there was no the rigidity that there is within a lot of Western music. The timing was fluid, but there was a pattern to it. That you could say, well, this is a 16 bars cycle, and it's not 16 bars of 4/4. It's 16 bars of whatever you have to take wherever the music takes you. So you can subdivide that 16 bars, or cut it down even, 16 beats, 1 2 3 4, 16 beats. And you can break that down in any way you like. Move the nominal bar lines about wherever you are, because the conventional way says that if you're going to play something, you have to have a time signature. And the concept I got from listening to Alaraka playing was that there's a time signature, but it's more of a cycle rhythm to it, that you can break it down, and you can break it down into individual bits, and so you can have 1, 2, 3. If it's breaking 4, 4, you break 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, like that. You can break it down into individual. And eventually I got to the point where in recent years when people said to me, what time is this at? I say, 1. There is only one time, and that is 1. So 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So if you happen to decide to shift that, which I used to do quite regularly, because if anybody ever tries to count most of the stuff I was doing in terms of singing, accompanying and singing, if you try to tap your foot through it, you break your leg, because you know, I can tell you before we start. Okay, well, nominally this is in 1, but it may be 1, 2, 3, 4, or it may be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, like that. There is no regularity to it at all. And in the case of singing, I'll go on to that in a second. So I'm missing huge chunks here because a lot of the time I'm not sure where it goes. This is all flow of consciousness stuff, because I couldn't see when the idea came up, when Laurie mentioned the whole idea of doing this. I thought, well, fine, I'll make notes and I'll write it all down, and I'll be able to follow that. And so it was almost like a script, but my eyes have deteriorated so badly that there's no point in writing down anything because I can't read it. So I couldn't, not only could I not see well enough to write it, but I couldn't see well enough, even when I had written it, to be able to read it back. So I have no idea where this is going or what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about because I was there at the time. but
It's perfect.
You know, a lot of this is, I'm just following the thread, wherever the thread happens to go, and sometimes not even following that. But where did I go? I got up to, the log cabin and all that carry on. Started playing with various people around there, different combinations of people. There used to be 3 hotels up on Royal Terrace. And there was the Lochue, the Arcade, and the Park. And I used to play regularly in the Park Hotel. I got a gig there. I remember Bill Barclay playing in the Lochue, which seemed to be slightly upmarket from where I was in the Park Hotel. And it was just like everybody else. It was a music night. It was just a piss up. Everybody there and just got roaring drunk and fell about and sang songs. And Bill was incredibly funny. So there was that, and there was the same thing with the Arcade. And I got a regular residency in the Park, along with I got 2 residencies. I got my own residency to sing, and then there was another one with a singer called Ali Watson, who I got a gig as accompanist, playing mandolin and whistle, along with Ali. He was one of the funniest people in the world, and I have a head full of scurrilous stories about Ali that I will not go into. He once leapt off the stage to fill in a fella in the audience who was up to some mischief, and Ali found this very disruptive. So the tables were at the same level as the stage. So you stepped off the stage onto the top of the tables, which Ali did. And I remember this night, there were pints everywhere as Ali ran off the stage onto the tables, jumped across the various tables and decked this guy in the audience, which I remember very clearly. One of the funniest things I've seen. But that was my residency in the park. So where to go after that? So after that, I joined up with various people, as I was saying. You know, one of them was Bob Eagleson, and I've been privileged in my life to play in bands with two of the greatest singers I've ever heard. One was Bob Eagleson, and the other was Davy Steele. And those two guys were just great singers. And Bobby and I got very friendly. Bobby played with a group called the Skerries, and my outstanding memories that I think it's possibly I can get away with talking about, because it's almost illegal but not quite. Bobby and I used to play, and there was a party. There was a group of nurses had a flat in Mardale Terrace down in Portobello, and Bobby was going about with one of the lasses there. And one particular night they had a party, and it was a Saturday night, and they decided it was going to be a fancy dress party, but they didn't tell anybody. And I went there, and Bobby and I were mates and playing together and all the rest of it. So I went there, and I had no fancy dress, so I borrowed one of the women in the flat had this pajama jacket, which was yellow, bright yellow pajama jacket. So I had very long hair at the time, and so I tied back the hair with a bandana and this yellow flowery jacket on, and that was that. We drank all night. It was one of these all-night parties, and the pubs were shut on a Sunday, so we drank overnight and Saturday night straight through into the Sunday, and between singing and indulging in various beverages, we ended up, by Sunday evening, we were looking for something to do, and came up with a solution. We used to go to what was called the Edinburgh Police Club. Well, there's at least a couple of people here who can remember. And we decided we were going to go to the Edinburgh Police Club that night and play a bit of music, and we could get a drink there. So we headed down. And what I'd forgotten was, at that stage, there was an awful lot of dope being smoked around Edinburgh, not entirely unconnected with us. So, so I decided to go down to the Edinburgh Police Club with a quarter ounce in my top pocket, a quarter ounce of Afghan black. So we, if you ever want to know what paranoia is, imagine walking into the Edinburgh Police Club, up onto the stage with a quarter ounce of Afghan in your top pocket. Then you look around and you suddenly realise where you are and what you're doing there. And if you want to know what paranoia is, that is it, I can tell you. But we got away with that one, and did not end up in jail. But I played with Bobby for a while after that, and then I met with a singer from England, from Yorkshire, called Robin Dransfield, who I was invited to become a resident at the club I was mentioning a minute ago in the High Street, in the Canongate rather, just below John Knox's house at the Talbot Tavern, and there was 3 or 4 singers there. There was Maurice McPhillips, Phil Taylor, Ian Stewart, and myself. We drafted in as a resident. So we used to sing there quite regularly. Or it was actually run like a folk club. It wasn't a pub as such. So it was what people would nowadays recognise as a folk club. But at those stages, it was slightly unusual in that the only other folk club that I can think of that operated at that time was the Buffs Club in Albany Street. And this club down in John Knox's house, the Canongate. But we had a singer booked there from England called Robin Dransfield. And Robin was from Harrogate in Yorkshire. And he was a great singer, smashing singer. And we just hit it off as people. We just got on very well. And Robin came up with this idea of, he'd just made a record with his brother. I'm leading forward quite a bit here. But he just made a record called The Route of the Blues, which sounds as if it could be a blues album, but it was actually, The Route of the Blues was an ex-military song, or a song about military. And it was a gorgeous album, and it was way ahead of its time. And he then decided that they were going to expand Robin and Barry Dransfield, they were going to expand it out into a trio. And he thought it would be a good idea if I joined them. So, being at that age where things like travelling to London didn't faze me at all. So I then jumped into a bus, ended up at Victoria Station in London, and camped myself out in Robin's flat for a couple of weeks. And because the idea of forming a band with him and Barry, it never ever made the slightest bit of sense. It didn't make any sense, and it didn't work at all. So we shelved that idea. But Robin and Barry had made this record called The Route of the Blues with Leither, Bill Leither's catalogue, and he said to me, "Come with me. We'll go and introduce you to Bill Leither. You should come with you." And I thought, oh, this is great. Nothing to lose here. So I went down and we met up with Bill Leither, and Robin said, "Sing." So I sang a song or two, and Bill Leither then said, "Great, we'll do a record of you," which was how it was done in those days. Nothing was ever formalised, you know, everything was all ad hoc. And I made this record for Bill Leither, and decided that one of the people I wanted to play with was a fiddle player called Ali Bain, who I had known for years up here. And I brought Ali in, and he played on a couple of tracks. And as a result of that, said, "Do you want to join the Boys of the Loch?" Because the Boys of the Loch was a duo from Northern Ireland called Cahill McConnell and Robin Morton. They were from Northern Ireland. Robin was over in Edinburgh at this point doing a PhD. And Cahill was nowhere. Cahill was kind of wandering, as Cahill did. And also Mike. Ali had been playing with a singer called Mike Willans. And then Mike decided to go and live in Denmark. So he said to me, "Do you want to join the Boys of the Loch?" I said, "Aye, okay." So I was joined the Boys of the Loch, and within a month we had made a record for Bill Leither again, and had this tour of the United States in August of that year. And I couldn't believe this. I thought, this is incredible. I don't want to go to America. And they said, "We've got this tour in America." And Ali had been there already. Now, one of the things that I haven't talked about so far was in 1969, Her Majesty's government decided that I should be sent on a thing that they called a retraining programme. I can't remember what they called it. But they decided that I should do this because I was signing on the dole. I was signing on the dole at the same time as I was doing the odd gig. They decided that this was a bit of a liability. I was never going to make it as a professional musician, so I should be retrained. So they decided to retrain me as a plumber. And the place that they decided to send me for this retraining was in Plymouth. It was the other end of the bloody island. So that was quite an experience. was learning to be a plumber, because I was a lousy plumber. I really was a terrible plumber. And I had absolutely no interest in being a plumber at all. And that was quite a thing. The first week I was in Plymouth, I found the folk club and made some great friends there. I mean, there were a couple of people, Graham and Val Lobb, and John Steele, and a load of other people. And one of the first weeks I was there, they had a band on. There was a local group. Everywhere had loads of folk groups in those days. And one of them, I can't remember their names. I think they were either the Tankards or the Taverners. A name something like that. One thing I remembered was that there was a lass sang with them called Alison Potts, who I didn't see after that. I got talking to her after the gig, and I didn't see her again for 20 odd years, and then it turned out that she was back living in Scotland again. And you'd probably know her by the name of Alison McMorland. So I remembered her back then as Alison Potts. But there was also, across in the Cornish side, there was Vic Legg and Larkan, who I became good friends with as well. So I liked Cornwall because I discovered very early on in my plumbing career that I had absolutely no interest in at all. But the digs that they put us in, there was the landlady had a dog, and me and this dog just got on great, particularly because the dog knew the way across the Tamar ferry, which used to run across from Plymouth, across the Tamar River estuary, and into Cornwall. And it was the old chain ferries, which was gorgeous. I thought it was a brilliant thing. But I used to go across there and take the dog for a walk, and take the dog down to the Tamar ferry, get on the ferry, get across in Cornwall, and there was a pub right at the other end of the Tamar crossing. And they were, shall we say, particularly flexible about the closing time, which appealed to me very much. So I used to do that every Friday and Saturday night. I'd go take the dog for a walk. Or the dog would take me for a walk, because I was guaranteed to get home again because it knew the way back. So I let it run and followed the dog home. And that was that. Anyway, where had I got to? Oh, yes. 1969, moved back to Scotland again, and moved into one of the most lunatic experiences of my life. Although lunatic would be the wrong word for it. It was just enjoyable periods of my life. It was 1969. I moved back here, and two things happened then. One was that Ian McAlmon, bless you, Ian McAlmon of the McAlmon Folk Group asked me to take part in a radio programme that they were doing called My Kind of Folk, which was the McAlmons, myself, and Barbara Dixon. And we were the two guests, myself and Barbara were the guests. And I did that then. And I expected, that's loads of stuff. I'm on, ask me on the radio now. So I'll just wait for the gigs offers to come in. And the gigs never came, of course. You need more than just a spot on a radio show that you're going to get anywhere. But that happened. But as a result of that, I ended up getting a slightly higher profile among people in Scotland, because the McAlmons I'd known for quite a while before that, and also I'd known Barbara as well. Barbara, Lassie Fife, then her and I and Tom Smith, who I mentioned earlier. Tom was the younger brother of Bill Smith, who was one of the founder members of the Corrie folk trio. And Tom was a great singer, wonderful singer. And Tom and I were good friends, and he decided that it would be a great idea if we formed a band, him, me, and Barbara Dixon. So I think we had one rehearsal ever, just to check it out. And I think we after we tried it, we just went off down the pub, and that was it. And nothing ever came of that, which was one of my regrets. It would have been quite a great experience, actually. But I wasn't singing very much in those days. I was more of a guitar player, and was getting a bit of work in doing session work after that. So then, 1969, Tom Smith got killed in a car crash, and that was the end of that friendship, and also of any possibility of forming a band with him and Barbara. So that was that over. And one thing, Tom had been a member of a band called the Cairn. And they'd just been making a record for Waverley, I think it was called, Waverley Records. And Bill Hill, who I mentioned earlier from my early experiences in the Waverley Bar, Bill was a member of the Cairn as well, along with Tom Smith. And so did all these songs written down that they'd been, or laid down already, and they had Tom's guitar playing on it. And so they were halfway through making this record, and then Tom got killed. So I got drafted in to fill in. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, was sitting there in the studio with headphones on, playing the guitar parts that Tom had played, and playing them into this record, which I believe somewhere is, I think it's out of print for a long time, but you might still be available in second-hand shops or something. Might be able to find it somewhere, but it was called the Cairn, and yeah. So that was living in this flat at that point, because I mentioned the McAlmans. Well, Hamish Bain, who was played whistle and concertina with the McAlmans, Hamish had fallen heir to this flat in Forest Road, and he'd taken over the tenancy from Bill Grieve, who was an Orcadian fella, and the two people I remember from there was Bill Grieve and Rod Sinclair. And Rod was from St Andrews, and he'd been sharing this flat with Bill Grieve. They moved out. And it was one of these flats that nobody ever, the tenancy never really changed hands, because when one group of people moved out, they turned the tenancy over to another group. So there was this kind of floating tenancy in this thing. And so there was never anything very formalised about it. You know, there was like Bill Grieve moved out, Rod Sinclair moved out, Hamish Bain moved in, and Hamish approached myself to move in as well. So I've got Rod Sinclair's old room, and Hamish took the room next door. And then there was also, who'd been a long-time friend of mine as well, was Tom Ward from MUCKLE in Fife. And Tom Ward was the tenant number 3, and tenant number 4 was Titch Freer, who that was the four musketeers. Myself, Hamish, Tom, and Titch, and it was quite a well party when it started there. It went on for several years. But my one outstanding memory of that was it was one of these things where there was a constant party in the flat, and it just went on for years. Whoever happened to be there at any one time, and who hadn't got thrown out. But it was all hell broke loose. There was no rules, and it was quite a well team. And one of my most enduring memories of that was there was a fellow from Aberdeen whose name shall remain nameless, except it was Arthur was his name, and I had this habit when I had a gig somewhere and I had enough money. I'd stopped being a plumber by this time. I'd been working on a building site and got molten lead in a ladle poured down my leg. So that was the end of my career as a plumber. And I thought, I don't care what happens now. You know, I live or die, I will make my living as a singer and musician rather than as any kind of plumber, because I'm not going to make it as a plumber.
And thank goodness you didn't choose plumbing, Dick. We're very, very grateful. I'm really enjoying listening to your memories. We might have to come back next year for the next instalment. Can I ask you a couple of questions about the singing? You mentioned that the to and fro of a perception of timing, of pulse, of rhythm, and the way that it's a conversation between the singer, the song, and if there's accompaniment, you know, how to fit that in. And it's it's usually a conversation between two people, you know, but in yourself, bringing together the influence of your mum, your dad. How did you negotiate with yourself in terms of following the song? What was your process there? I take it the song came first. I know you were an instrumentalist, but yes, when you dedicated yourself to singing and songs, how did you develop your accompaniment in such a supportive way for the song?
Right, well, everything started with the song. If I was accompanying a song, everything started, finished with the song. And in terms of doing it, I mean, any advice I ever give to anybody who's thinking of singing is preparation is the be-all and end-all of everything. You've got to be prepared if you're going to do it and sing properly. I don't mean just singing for a sing-around or a party or a session in a pub. I mean, if you're going to stand on a stage and sing from there, then you've got to actually treat the people that you're singing to, and also the song. You've got to treat them with respect. So the preparation is everything. You've got to make sure that you know the words of the song, to stands to reason, but you've actually got to be able to say all the way through to anything that might arise. If anybody comes up and asks you, what does that word mean? What does that line mean? Mm-hmm. What's that about? To be able to answer that without even thinking about it, that you know it that well, that I would, in preparation for singing a song, I would sing the song to myself without accompaniment, just wandering about. Whatever I was doing, I would do it all the time until the song was so deeply embedded in my head that there was no way I could ever forget the words. Or, that to me it's unforgivable to walk on stage, and everybody can forget words, of course, but you've got to be able to know how to handle it, how to be able to cover it. And it's one of these things, you have to know the song so well that you get beyond technique. And singing at that kind of level is you've got to be beyond technique. You've got to have technique, of course, because everything begins and ends with that. but it's not. That's only the beginning. Technique is the beginning of the process of performing a song. So you have to know the song so well that you go beyond technique. You know the song so well, and you know exactly what you're going to do with it so well that you don't even have to stop and think about technique, because it's there, you know. And I would always begin and end everything starts and finishes with the song, but then you kind of, what I would do is I would break the song down in my own mind until I knew it, knew exactly where the emphasis was, where the stresses were, where the shifts were, what was that bit there. I wonder, can I stretch that song, that line a wee bit there, or can I make that line a bit longer there? And if I decided to do that, if the song's nominally in 4/4, I'm trying to think of an example here. And I can't, off the top of my head, I can't.
What if we talk about your relationship with the ballads? So, I remember in our previous, Dick and I have been meeting up for coffee conversations, woolly hats. It's been great. I have absolutely loved every minute of it, as you can probably tell. And one of the things I remember us speaking about was the kind of understanding the internal pulse of a ballad.
Yes.
It does. The song has its own time, and it's not about dancing, and it's not rigid. It is flexibility. The song has to breathe. I remember we spoke about Glen Logie, we spoke about the Fleur in Northumberland, and accompanying a ballad is a very specific set of skills, isn't it? It's a long-term conversation. How long did it take you to get underneath the skin of a ballad? I mean,
As long as it took.
Yeah.
There's no definite thing. Some ballads are easy to learn than others, and some of them have got depth. Mm-hmm. Every ballad has got its own depth, which you have to, to sing the song. Firstly, find out what the song's about, of course, and memorise it, get into it until you can actually think what the characters in the song are doing. Why is that character doing that there? Why is that? And I remember once having a long conversation with Ray Fisher about this. It was I was hitting a problem with. It wasn't me that was doing it; somebody else who was singing it. But the ballad of Thomas the Rhymer, or it wasn't. It was Tamlin. Or what was it? Tamlin, or no, it may have been Tam. Yeah, but where the character in the song runs up with the Queen of Fairyland, and
That's True Thomas, yeah.
True Thomas, yeah.
Yeah. With the 3 roads.
That's right. And I was discussing this with Ray, because who understood ballads as well as anybody I ever met. And we're talking about these 3 roads that are there. There is the road to hell. There is the road to heaven. There is a 3rd road, which is there in the ballad. So what was that 3rd road? What was it? You know, it's neither heaven nor hell. The road to purgatory, or what is it? And we started to discuss drug addiction.
Mm-hmm. For those that don't know the ballad, it's the bonny road that takes you to Elfinland. So it's open to interpretation. Yeah.
That's again. And Ray began to talk about somebody that she knew, a young person who had the problem with addiction, and who was, anyway, cut a long story short, we came to the conclusion that this was the road of disengagement, the road to oblivion, or what lies at the heart of addictions, to shut everything out, the non-involvement. And we had quite a long chat about it, you know. I mean, I'm abbreviating things here, but it was a lot longer than this. But it read some fascinating insight. But there is something like that in every ballad, which is the whole reason why the ballads are still there, and why they were in the first place. Is that there is within inside any ballad. You know, you mentioned Glen Logie there a minute ago, which to me the key to the ballad of Glen Logie is when, but I prefer to call it Bonnie Jeannie O'Bethilne, which is she is the key to the whole ballad, because the whole song appears to be about this guy called Glen Logie, and about the fact that he turns her down. She's just to explain for anybody that doesn't know it. The ballad, she approaches Glen Logie and says, "I really fancy you," and he then turns it. Now, this is to me is the key. He's together with a load of his mates. So out he comes with this pile of machismo nonsense, and says she's approached him, so she's chatting him up, and he says, you know, dismisses her offhand, and then she decides that she's had enough of this and she's going to commit. She's going to die, and the father writes a letter to the Glen Logie talking about the fact that the Bonnie Jeannie, his daughter, she'll be dead before long. She's going to die, and Glen Logie then, and therein lies the heart of the song, where Glen Logie then when Logie got the letter, he'd been among men. It shouldn't spark Glen Logie. What does young women mean? So he does the aloof bit, you know, the macho bit, and then comes the cross where it says, but when he looked on the letter, Alex Lofke he, which is fine, can't carry on. But when he read out it, the tear blint as he, gae saddle me the black horse, gae saddle me the brown Bonnie Jeannie, but only we did, ere I went. But the horses weren't saddled, nor led on the green until Bonnie Glen Logie was 3 miles as lane. So here's this big bravado macho stuff of she's just a wee lassie, you know. And then afterwards he turns away, and you get this, in my head I get this image of him turning away from all his mates and turning his back on them, so that he can read the letter and starts greeting because he thinks he's going to lose his lass. So to me that's where the song hinges around those. You know, and every song has got those kind of things in it. Every ballad has got something in it like that. Like you get the Fair Flor of Northumberland as well, we were just talking about. You've got it towards the end of that, where everybody thinks that the song is about this lassie's stupidity. And to me, the key of the Fair Flor of Northumberland is the mother's wisdom rather than the daughter's folly, where it comes to the very end of it, and she said, where she goes in and confesses to her father what's going on. She's helped to release this guy from jail, helped to get him out of jail.
Steals a horse. Steals the horse, that's it, over the border.
And he then says, look, I'm married already, so tough luck. And she then goes back and says to her father that this is happening, and the father behaves like a complete arsehole, and says, oh, this is a terrible thing you've done. And then she goes in to see her mother, and the mother says, don't be silly, we've all done stuff like that, you know. And so then the song, why does the mother know that? What does she know about all this, that she can turn and say to her daughter, don't worry about it, you know, you've all done stupid things like that in our lives. You know, where does that come from? You know, so it's tracing all that back through the song, and that, to me, that informs the whole song.
Yeah.
The key to the heart of it, you know.
And understanding the people in the song, the characters, what happened, how it affected them, and
That's right.
The relief when the mother smiles finally. She's getting sent home in a cart, I think, and she has to face her father, and then talks to the mother. The mother smiles, and you know, thank goodness,
That's right.
everything's going to be okay. Yeah. Beautiful. Right, let's open it up. We'll take a couple of questions from the audience, please. Do we have a mic? Well, while it appears, I'll ask just one more. There's a very unique sort of set of contradictions in your life, Dick, where it feels like you're searching for some satisfaction in your voice, in what you are choosing to say, and in the music that you're selecting to speak through, and the music that you're writing. Working in bands, but also solo, carrying out detailed library research, looking at manuscripts, books, song collections, and also learning from people, Jeannie Roberts and other peers, Ray Fisher. And do you feel that you said what you needed to say in your music? Do you feel that you reached that point where you said, you found your voice and said what you wanted to say through music?
I tried. This is the best I can say. I wouldn't say I'd ever done it. I'd say I tried. And that's a never-ending task that you're talking about. Have you done it? If I came to the conclusion that I've done that, I would have stopped it years before. There would be no point in continuing. If I'd said everything I wanted to say, I still think things in songs. I still think of songs, and either traditional songs or songs that other people have written or songs that I've written myself. I still hear things in them, or still think of things to say in them that I don't think I've ever. Nobody, it's like anything. You develop as a lifetime job.
Yeah.
And you never ever feel, or I never feel that I've actually done it. I don't think I've ever did it. I've done a passable job, but that was it. Thank you.
Just briefly before we open things up, there was a shift for you, I think, moving into a different kind of love song, where you felt that you'd said what you needed to say in folk music at that time. And your work shifted a bit. It became, I think stylistically it changed, but also there were, the Thatcher years to respond to, and you entered a new phase there, didn't you?
Yeah, by the time 1979 came, there were two things happened at the end of the 70s. One was I left 5-hand reel, but I'd been playing electric guitar, and I'm working with a full band. And also the election of the Thatcher government. And those two things propelled me away from. I made a record called Handful of Earth, which I thought, well, I've done what I can there. That's the best I can do it with interpreting traditional songs. There's other people who will come along, do it much better, but that's the best that I can do. And so, in order to see what it is I'm saying, I've got to actually stop observing or being an interpreter of songs and start engaging as a protagonist. And so that was why I suddenly went from the acoustics and traditional song interpretations of Handful of Earth and through into doing my stuff, that to comment on the times and engage in what I was doing in the early 80s. And it was those two things. Firstly, I think the election of the Thatcher government in '79 was possibly a seminal moment for me.
Yeah. Question? What have we got? Should we take the left side? Sorry, guys. Thank you.
Hi, Dick. It's great to hear so much about your work, and it's just following up on the kind of political side. So I edit a magazine called Scottish Left Review, and where it's interesting when you're talking about the politics of that sort of some of the more communist work you were involved around. In America, there was a bit of a tension, I think, between the likes of Phil Oakes and Seeger, and a bit of a question as to whether, you know, where people are on the political spectrum, and how to use folk music to the best revolutionary end. And I just wondered how you navigated that as well in terms of the decisions that you've just started talking about, where to put your energies, or who were the most inspiring kind of figures for you that you thought, yeah, they'd taken a path that makes sense to me and that you were emulating. Any more about any of that would be really interesting.
I think you're right. That I don't think there was any conflict between Phil Oakes and Pete Seeger. I think there's a difference in approach and a difference in Pete reckoned that the most effective way for most of what he was doing was to involve people directly in terms of singing a song that's got a chorus that people can join in with, and he was wonderful at it. I mean, I remember once being at the Tuner Festival in Denmark. There was myself, Ian McAlmon, Alan Taylor at the side of the stage, and Pete was there. And Pete went on and he was doing a set. He started out by saying, "Michael, row the boat ashore." And I was standing there and I thought, if Ian or Alan or myself were to stand up there and do "Michael, row the boat ashore," people would wet themselves laughing. And I thought, because just before I had that thought, I was listening to Pete singing "Michael, row the boat ashore," and I thought, this is actually a great song. What the song's saying is brilliant. I'd never thought about it before, because you think "Michael, row the boat ashore" is a throwaway song. But here was Pete, and he was singing there with this, he was singing to an audience that didn't understand English all that well, and he had everybody singing, even though they couldn't understand the totality of what he was doing. And I thought, well, I can't do that. I can't do what Pete's doing. I'm not that kind of person. There's a place for songs that are sing-along songs where everybody's singing choruses and all that. That's great. There is a place for that, but it's not what I do. I'm hopeless at that. And Pete was superb at it. He's great. You want to get an audience singing, get Pete Seeger. Phil Oakes, on the other hand, was Phil was, I think, slightly in the line I'm talking about, for myself. Phil's songs were analytic, and a lot of the time he was very actually journalistic in his commentary. And he didn't go out of his way to get an audience to sing, because he was much more interested in appealing. Pete was more interested in appealing to emotion, and Phil was much more into appealing to people's intellect. Whereas his arguments were all on an intellectual level rather than an emotional level.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
Thank you.
Down the front here, John Barrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Dick, could you explain to the audience why Clan Alaba came about? Just in a couple of minutes,
A couple of weeks, like. No, well, it came about because the initial idea for it came because I'd been through the whole 5-hand reel bit in the 70s. Then through the 80s, we were playing solo all the time, and I used to get fed up playing solo. Musically, I got fed up because I found I was starting to repeat what I was doing in terms of musical ideas, not lyrical ideas, but in music. And then I was doing a gig It may have been in somewhere it may have been Hartlepool, but it was. Oh, wait a minute, no, it was doing that way anyway. Somewhere near Hartlepool, and I broke down on the way, and also on the bill for this gig was Sheila's, Patsy Sidden and Mary McMaster, both harpers, and. We got that. It's a long story anyway, to cut out most of it. But there was a point where Patsy and Mary were on, and Patsy's husband at that time, Davy Steele, who I had known and liked a hell of a lot, and I really admired him as a singer. Davy and I were sitting in the front row, and Patsy and Mary were on doing their set, and I suddenly saw this vision of a full band with the two harps playing together, and what else, where that would lead to, what else could fit in there. And I think it's producer mind rather than anything else. And I thought, I know what will do this. And I'd worked together with Dave Tulloch in Five Hand Rule, and worked together several times with Mike Travis, and the way they both played as drummers, together with the idea of the twin harps, I thought, well, what else do you need? You get the two harps, the two drummers. How can you evolve that? Or what will the evolution of it be? You put those four people together. I thought, well, as well as that, Davy, who needs another singer, Davy Steele, myself, we need a piper, which in the earliest stage was going to be Gary West, who Gary couldn't make it as a full-time thing, his university degree on, and then Fred Morrison, who played with Davy and I can't remember, they were a band together, but I think Brian McNeil. So the whole thing just fell into place from that. Once I started with the idea of the two harpers and the two drummers together, was the genesis of Clanalpa.
I think there's so many music projects and episodes to your music making to explore. And backstage we were talking. And how many miles of touring did you think? What was your estimate?
Well, driving. I came to the conclusion when I started getting out that I'd driven 1.5 million miles.
1.5 million. Just amazing. So, but there are more events on at the festival, and we're going to have to leave it there today. I would love to continue this in some form, so we'll see what we can do to be continued. And a few quick thank yous to Trad Fest, to Jana and Douglas, an absolute dream to work with on every occasion. Yes. The festival sponsors, including Creative Scotland and the William Grant Foundation, University of Edinburgh, Celtic and Scottish Studies and the School of Scottish Studies Archives. Thanks to Craig Gaskin on sound, Dave Daly on lights, Sandy Butler on live stream, the Traverse team, the University of Edinburgh Traditional Artist in Residence, Fraser Fifield. Thank you so much to Laura Gaughan for joining us today, and everyone here and at home for joining us too. And finally, thank you, Dick Gaughan, for everything.
Thank you. And thanks, Laurie. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. And it was quite nerve-wracking. It was more stressful doing that than doing a gig on my own, playing the guitar.
Before you all go, there's been every night at